I'm Chris Nessie, host of Behind the Mic, Voices of the EPN, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Dennis A. Feece. That's right, he's back on the show. Last time we talked about his novel, Love, Pride, and Murder. This time we're focused on catching up with his character, T.B. Stone, in a new situation. The novel is called Of Towers and Shadows. This is awesome, exciting, great characters, and I love this story. So much to talk about. Thanks for listening and sharing. And by the way, before you go, it'd be so cool if you took a minute to help out the podcast. What do you think? That'd be neat. Here's a couple ways. One, you could tell a friend and share the links. Two, you could go to my website and leave a review and subscribe. And three, how about click on the link on my website homepage and buy me a coffee? By doing this, you could donate $1 or $2 to help me deal with the costs associated with producing the podcast. What do you think? You're cool. Thanks so much. Enjoy the show.
Make it possible for people to visualize something. So if I describe a scene or I describe a place, I try to infuse it with enough visual description that people can not just identify with it, not just understand the words, not just translate it into their own pictures, but they can actually see it.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Miletto. Teaching, learning, leading K12. Teaching, learning, leading K12. Teaching, learning, leading K12, with Dr. Steve Miletto.
Dennis A. Feece may not sound like your typical novelist who crafted a murder mystery, but he calls upon a variety of experiences, hobbies, and schooling to create the realism in his newest book, Towers and Shadows, a T.B. Stone mystery. For 3 decades, he engaged in a career of book manufacturing, serving from frontline supervisor to vice president of operations. He worked for several companies, including Bertelsmann, Maple-Vail Book Manufacturing, and RR Donnelley. He then became a Pastoral Associate at a local church, serving for several years. Feece earned a B.S. majoring in psychology and minoring in religious studies from College Misericordia in Pennsylvania. He earned an M.A. in Theology from University of Scranton in Pennsylvania. Born and raised in Plymouth, Indiana, he has also lived in Connecticut, New Hampshire, and now resides in Montrose, PA. He enjoys weightlifting, writing, and exploring his spiritual curiosity. He has written 3 novels and is working on the 4th. Our focus today is Dennis's latest, Of Towers and Shadows. Dennis, welcome back and say hi to everyone.
Hi, everyone, and especially you, Steve.
Great to have you back, Dennis, and it's cool that you continue this series with this character we're going to talk about here in just a minute. And the last time we talked was in October of 23, and we were focused on your book, Love, Pride, and Murder. That was episode 627. Just a note, I'm at 707 now or something like that, so which is cool.
Wow.
So it was fall of 23, so it was almost a year ago. We're very close there. Share a little bit about Love, Pride, and Murder.
Love, Pride, Murder. That was the first of this series. This is intended to be at least 3 books, making up a trilogy. And I think I mentioned last time, if people read it and they enjoy it, then I'll extend it beyond the 3. But the first one, Love, Pride, and Murder, introduced the characters that have become, I guess, known to the readers in the second novel. So you can always think of it as an introduction to those characters, at least in part. It took place in New Hampshire. T.B. Stone lives in New Hampshire, in Concord, New Hampshire. His lady love, as it turns out, and that happens very quickly, so I'm not giving anything away, and it's already sort of a fait accompli, if I can use that term, in the second novel. It starts that way. But she's his true love, I guess, to some extent, and I think that he sort of fills that role for her as well. It's told in the first person in both novels, and so everything is filtered through, the sensibilities of T.B. Stone. By the way, his name, T.B. stands for Thomas Bradley, and he was named after one of his uncles, who was very big in his early years. So the TB moniker is something that he acquired when he was in his childhood, and it just sort of stuck. And so he's he's blessed with it. Curiously, as the novels progress, you learn that nobody calls him TB. He introduces himself as TB, and he just sort of assumes that people will. But until after they get to know him, nobody calls him TB. They call him Tom, they call him Tommy, they call him Thomas, they call him Stone, but they don't call him TB, which is just a little bit of a curiosity. It gives you some insight, I think, and the reason I mention that is it gives you sort of insight into his character. So as he relates to other people, I think. So do you need more than that, or is that enough about Love, Pride, and Murder?
No, that's good. That's good, and I like that that he really wants to be TB, but it doesn't seem to have an impact on others. So I like that. All right. So how would you describe your writing?
The style of it, you mean?
Yes.
That sort of thing, or just
if you were telling
how I write, or what is it exactly?
When you're talking to somebody, if somebody asks you, so before they've read anything, and they said, what is it you write? How would you answer that question to them? How would you describe it to them?
What do you write? Not knowing. Yeah. Well, I write. In this case, I write mysteries. I've written all sorts of things over the years, but now that I'm in a place where I can take time and I can do pretty much what I want to do, I write mysteries because it's my favorite kind of fiction, and I'm tired of writing academic stuff. And I realize that your audience tends to be academic types, or at least a lot of them, and I'm not dismissing that, certainly. I mean, I spent a good deal of my time wading through all of those kinds of books and writing papers and whatnot. But in terms of entertainment, I just enjoy mysteries, and I think there are mysteries that I have sort of unconsciously emulated. The probably the most influential are the writings in the 30s, Raymond Chandler and some of the other writers that have gone on to, well, of course they're all gone now, but they have gone on to influence not just mystery writing, but a certain kind of mystery writing, and even, in the larger picture, some pretty good literature. It's hard to find a better writer than Raymond Chandler anywhere. A few, I'm sure, but not when I read. I like Raymond Chandler a lot. Dashiell Hammett is another one. Recently, I started reading John D. MacDonald, and then currently I'm reading Ross MacDonald, who was a little bit later. I think he was 50s, mostly 60s. Anyway, they all learned from those early writers in the 20s and the 30s. Raymond Chandler in particular, Dashiell Hammett, of course. Dashiell Hammett was very popular because he was popular. He was a personality, not just a writer, but a personality, and he made an impact on the area that he lived in California. And a lot of his writing was preceded by his personality, and I think that had an impact on how popular his writing was at the time. But this is just my opinion. I don't want to offend anybody. Most of those people are long gone, so I don't think I will be. But I don't think that Dashiell Hammett is anything like the writer that Raymond Chandler is. Chandler was a sourpuss kind of guy, and nobody really liked him. He was hard to get along with, and very cynical, and he was one of those kind of guys. Dashiell Hammett, he played to the public. He liked people, and he did all that kind of stuff. So they were very different. It would be a lot easier to deal with Dashiell Hammett than it would be to deal with Raymond Chandler, I'm sure. So I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. But when pen reached paper, I don't think that Dashiell Hammett would have been capable of carrying Raymond Chandler's notes. I mean, I think he was just a much better writer. Now, that's my opinion. And if we were dealing with this on Facebook, I'd have all kinds of people that would argue with me about it. But fortunately, that's not the case. So as far as my style is concerned, it's influenced, hopefully, I'd like to think, by Raymond Chandler, at least in the beginning, but an updated kind of Raymond Chandler, certainly. And it's not the slouch-hatted, cigar-smoking, hard-drinking kind of PI. It's a more modern version of the PI, but still a PI. And in today's world, whether it's in novels or in written fiction, or in even the movie world or television world, for that matter, you don't see PIs all that often. You see crime fighters, you see, all sorts of things. In the cozy mysteries, you see a different kind of writing, obviously, than what I do. But still, I think that what I was trying to do is make a private eye that was viable, in our world today, and make him in a relevant kind of way. I wanted him to be exposed to some of the things that we're exposed to and deal with them. Part of what made Chandler so good was because he was able to look at the world around him, encapsulate it in many ways, and then work his way through it. And he was working his way through it through the eyes of Philip Marlowe, typically. I mean, those are the ones that we remember. And Philip Marlowe was a personality probably not unlike Raymond Chandler in many ways, but in other ways, pretty much not like Raymond Chandler. He had more license to do what he wanted to do, I guess. To some extent, that's what I've been trying to do with T.B. Stone. Look at the world around, see different things, and then personalize it. It has a lot to do with where he goes in an investigation, how he goes about solving, whatever the mystery is, and then the resolution of it comes about as a result of all those kinds of things. One of the things I like to do with the T.B. Stone character, he likes to engage people around him as he's solving the mystery, instead of just sort of, in a I don't want to say selfish way, but in a self-directed kind of way. The Raymond Chandler character was isolated. He really didn't engage other people except when he had to, and that was pretty much the way Raymond Chandler was too. So there's no surprise there. But T.B. Stone isn't like that. T.B. Stone, he's a solitary person in the sense that he's self-contained, but he has friends, he has relatives, he has associates that he works with and deals with, and he doesn't just use them along the way to solve the mystery. He engages them, and so in the end, it's a whole group of people that solve the mystery. Really, it's not just T.B. Stone. So anyways, I think that's probably enough about how I write. It's probably way too much.
Oh, that's cool though. It's cool to have those influences and such, and what you've done with your character and who the writers are that you emulate. I like that. All right, so let's get into the novel a little bit. So tell us what Stone Investigations is, because it pops up right at the beginning, or soon in the beginning.
Stone Investigations is the storefront name for Thomas Bradley Stone, and it's located in Concord, Massachusetts. For those of you that might not know anything about New Hampshire, Concord is the state capital, and so all of the government buildings are located in Concord, or at least most of them. And many of his clientele are people that are somehow involved with the government actions in New Hampshire. Now, granted, New Hampshire is a small state, so it's not like a private investigator in Albany or Los Angeles or someplace where you're getting involved in government at a much higher, seemingly a more important level. But still, government bureaucrats, doesn't matter where they are, and dealing with them, whether it's in New Hampshire or New York, it's going to be pretty much the same, or Boston for that matter. Boston's a lot closer. Anyway, that's sort of where he normally finds his business. But these two novels, he finds his business in a very different place in all cases, and in the third one they're writing now, in a different place. There are some bureaucrats along the way that he meets and deals with, but most of the people that he's working with, and the for want of a better term, the bad guys, the people that seem to make life difficult and are responsible for some of the mysteries, are not government bureaucrats either. So even though he lives, and even though he gets most of his business, this background sort of story of him from those sources, government sources, that's not what he's doing in these books. He does something entirely different. So anyway, that's sort of the overall approach. This particular mystery of Towers and Shadows, he's dealing with. First of all, he has become very close to Lucia Nardoni, who is his first client in the first book, in Love, Pride, and Murder. And since that, they become close, and so she is very much a part of everything that he does. And she in fact is joining him in his investigation at the very beginning. An interesting kind of way, a funny kind of way, I guess. But the story itself starts when her aunt calls and tells the two of them, as they're drinking wine and enjoying the evening, that she thinks she's being stalked. And so Lucia was very close to her aunt. In fact, her aunt, well, I won't go into all of that, but she's very upset about it, just immediately upset about it. And she, asks questions, and they go back and forth. And as it turns out, they agree to go up to where Connie is her name. Her aunt is Aunt Connie, where she lives, and they're going to help her try to figure out what's going on with the stalker. And that's how it begins. And from that point forward, it gets more and more complex and a little bit convoluted, I think. And the first part of it is almost like an investigative procedural. I mean, it's, they're following the clues and they're drawing conclusions and they go off down a path. Well, the latter part of the book goes in a very different direction. And that is, I think, it's almost like having two different books in one. I mean, there's a bridge and it all makes sense, and one leads into the other and one, follows the other. So it is one novel. It's not two, but it takes a very different approach to the way the world is. Did I describe it fairly well?
Oh, very much so. Very much so.
No,
very much so. And it leads into what I wanted to ask next, which is because you shared the influences that you had on and the types of writers that they were and the types of characters they created. And T.B. Stone has some nuances and probably some throwbacks, but at the same time some differences. And so can you talk about what drives him? What makes him do what he does?
That's an interesting question. I think it comes from his childhood, the way he was raised. His father passed away at a fairly early age, and TB was at that point he was a young man. But I think that had a lot of influence on why he became a little bit of a loner. He had an uncle who was very influential. That all comes out in the first novel. When you read the second novel, if you read the second novel as a freestanding kind of novel without having read the first one, it would seem that TB is initially very much influenced by Lucia. He's sort of wrapped up in their relationship, and everything sort of feeds off of that relationship in the first part of the novel. In the second part of the novel, some of the sort of the shadow side of TB comes out, and as he's solving the mystery, pursuing all the leads and doing everything that he needs to do in order to accomplish the solution, some of the less savory parts of his personality emerge. And you don't really see that, but if you think back to some of the things that he did when he was a child, and some of the things, or as a young man, and some of the things that influenced him back then, you can see how it's almost a part of him, and that allows him to do certain things that normally you wouldn't expect TB to do. He's a nice guy. He's a friendly guy. Everybody likes him that he meets. He kids around. He has a good sense of humor, all that. But he has a darker side, and that comes out towards the latter part of the novel, I think. So as far as motivation is concerned for him, what is it that drives him? He has a sense of honor. He has a sense of what's appropriate during any given time. He is a very upfront, straightforward kind of guy. But at the same time, he has a side that he never discloses to anyone. And when Lucia comes along, that's the first opportunity he's had to really show himself and to really be completely open. Up to that point in time, not so much so. So if you think about those two things going together, how much she has meant to him, how much she means to him, and what he was like before and how he is now, I think that gives you some sense of what his motivation was all about. Now, I hope I didn't give away too much.
No, you didn't, and it's cool. That's
okay.
It's cool because he seems like a real person, and especially now that I'm getting to know him in his the second book, and he has real person type things going on in his life, and along with what may or may not be a mystery or some problem that needs attention to and stuff like this, which I really like the way it begins, because it you don't know where it's going with that storyline. I like that. So, but
it's entertaining, nevertheless. I mean, it's not like it's so murky that you can't figure out what's going on, and you don't like that. I think there's or at least what I tried to do. Maybe I didn't succeed, but what I tried to do was make it entertaining in such a way that even though there were a lot of questions, a lot of things going on that you really couldn't quite grasp at that juncture, you always had a sense that TB was going to figure it out, and it was going to proceed, and there would be and I think that's is part of the satisfaction in reading a novel. So.
Oh, very much so. There's nothing better than Well, what I like, I read a lot, and what I like is when authors are able to make you want to, you just kind of you get swallowed up into the story to the point where at the end you're like, okay, what's next? Let's go. You got the other one ready? Let's go. And I like that a lot. So, all right. So let's talk about you and imagery, because you have a great way of using imagery. And I'm going to pull out a couple in the next couple of questions that I ask. And one is on page 8 that really just hits me. Spring in New Hampshire is not an abstraction, but rather just a series of numbers on a calendar. These sweet, promising days have always been like a lover gently convincing me to abandon routines and go dancing instead. I love this. I've never been to New Hampshire, but I think I've experienced this feeling. I mean, because the whole idea that what you're looking at just makes you go, do I have to go to work? Do I have to? I don't need to do this, do I? Because I'd just rather just sit here and watch the butterflies or whatever.
Yeah. As far as the imagery is concerned, what I do like to do is make it possible for people to visualize something. So if I describe a scene, or I describe a place, I try to infuse it with enough visual description that people can not just identify with it, not just understand the words, not just translate it into their own pictures, but they can actually see it. They can actually feel it. And so that's what I attempt to do. And I don't know that I'm always successful, but that's what I'm driving at. In that particular scene, I was there. I mean, I know what New Hampshire's like. And, the natives kid about, now you're in Georgia, so this will all be alien to you if that's where you spent most of your life. I have to point out that New Hampshire is deep Yankee country. I mean, if you get above the border between Massachusetts and Vermont, and even parts of Vermont are very much the same way. You get further, you get up past Manchester, up into the northern part. Those are Yankees, and they may stay up there, live and die, and their children do the same thing, and they're Yankees, okay? And they see the world differently. They work hard. They work constantly. They are self-sufficient. They don't need anybody. And yet they're the friendliest people, even though they're quiet. They are the most helpful people, even though they're quiet, even though they will give you space. Can I tell you a story?
Go
It happened to me one time. New Hampshire and all of New England, up that part of the country, a lot of snow. You have these big storms, and they come and they go, and then the next week you get another one. It's just one on top of the other, and you have some of the drifts are like this. I mean, they're 20 feet high by the time the plows get through. It's just a lot of snow, and it never goes away in the wintertime. Well, we lived along where my wife and kids and I lived was along a lake in the central part of New Hampshire. And we were sort of down in like a little mini depression. So you come up to the highway and you're maybe, at least in terms of the height, you're maybe 10 feet higher than you are where we lived along the lake. So it was like a depression in the landscape. It was gradual. I mean, it wasn't like a hole. So when it snowed, a lot of the snow came into that little depression, if there was any wind at all, and it would fill up. Now, the first winter that I was there, and this is, I had an experience like that. I grew up in the Midwest, so I knew what snow was right south of Chicago, so it wasn't anything alien, but the way it came, how much of it was something that was a little new to me. So I'm out there with my snow shovel. I need a snow blower or anything like that. I can do it. I can go out and muscle that snow out of the way. Well, one morning I need to get to work, right? And I'm 45 minutes from work, so I get up early, and I know there's snow out there. And I step out of the house, and it's knee deep. And then I walk down to where the garage is at, which is not attached to the house. It's down closer to the lake. I mean, not all that far down, but And so now it's up to my waist. Okay. Now I'm not exaggerating. That's the way it was. And so I look at the doors to the garage, and it's up to the handles. The snow is up just below the handles to open up the garage. And I'm thinking, okay. So I managed to get into the garage, get the snow shovel out, and I start shoveling. And an hour later, I've got a nice little path for the car that extends maybe, 7 or 8 feet. And then I've got this, I'm throwing the snow so much higher because there's no place to put it, right? And I'm busy and I'm working and I don't stop and I'm shoveling snow and I know I'm going to be late for work, but I can explain, let them kid me about being a, what was it they called us? Flatlander, calling me a flatlander, even though I wasn't, but from their point of view, I was a flatlander. And then they'd laugh about it. I'd be okay. Well, anyway, I'm shoveling, right? And across the road, which was up higher from where I was at, there was a veterinarian, a guy I didn't know who he was. So I signed. And the little drive went up to his house, which is further up. It's like a slope going up to like a mini mountain. And he had, because he was a smart Yankee, he had a pickup truck with a blade on it, tires with chains. I mean, he was ready. And so he had, from the time I was out there for an hour before he showed up, and when he showed up, he plows out his whole drive. He plows out around his drive. He puts all the snow up. He knows exactly what he's doing because he's done it for his whole life. And I know he's watching me because I'm watching him. As a school, I'm watching. And he's finished. He gets his drive completely done. And he pulls up on the road and he yells down at me. He leans out of the cab and he yells down at me, "I admire your gumption, but could I give you a hand?" And I looked at him and laughed, just like you're doing. I laughed and I said, "I very much appreciate that." And so like in 5 minutes, he got rid of the rest of the snow. I had a nice little path from my car. And he did in about no more than 10 minutes what it took me an hour and a half to do, and I wasn't even close. So that's the way the Yankees are. And that was the last time I saw them. And I lived there for 3 years in that house, over 3 years. It was the last time I actually spoke to them. And that's just the way Yankees are. They're there to help you, and they're friendly. And if you want to be friendly with them, then they're friendly with you. But they don't come over and come over just to visit. They don't. They just don't. They're very very solitary people. So anyway, think about TB and think about the novel, and you got that flavor for it. And I tried to recreate that now. Springtime comes to your scene. Springtime comes. All the snow starts melting. You can see the greenery coming out between the snow banks, right? The weather is getting warmer, and that's when the black flies start. And the black flies come in, and they're as big as sparrows. I'm exaggerating, but it feels like it. And the mosquitoes are bigger than the black flies. And this is true. The people, because they spend all their time outside, in the winter and the summer, whatever, they're outside, they wear these hats with nets, the men and the women, not just the women, but the men as well, with this gauzy material that prevents the flies and the mosquitoes from getting in. And that's how they spend their time outdoors. Not everybody, but most of the people do. Well, I remember that first spring really well. Waiting because the nights are frigid. It all freezes over at night. What melts in the daytime freezes over at night. And you wake up in the morning, it's still frozen, and blah, 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 and on and on. And that seems to go forever. And then one morning you wake up and you can hear the birds, and most of the snow is gone from the roads, and you can actually get into your garage without doing anything or chipping ice. And suddenly it's spring. And spring lasts about 3 to 4 weeks in New Hampshire, and then you've got summer. But you get a good 3 weeks of spring. And so those days are precious. They're like gold. They're like more important than gold. I mean, and it's true. I mean, that's what I tried to create. I tried to create that sense of wonder because you've got all this snow and all this misery. Now, granted, as a flatlander, it seemed like that was the harshest winter I ever went through. It probably wasn't, but it seemed like it because it was such a contrast. And then the spring is like, it's like, do you drink wine? No. Are you a wine drinker?
Not really.
Steve?
I'm a beer guy.
Not really?
So,
Okay.
yeah.
A beer guy?
Yeah.
What kind of beer do you drink? I'm sorry?
I like ales and lagers and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. So you can distinguish between, it's just not a matter of going down buying a case. And,
Right.
You select the right kind of beer, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Microbrew, that kind of stuff.
I like a lot of that stuff. But I stay away from IPAs. I'm like, I'm not a fan of like orange and grapefruit in my,
No.
in my beer. So
you're a purist. Yeah, you're a purist. I understand. I'm of German heritage, so I understand that. Yeah, think about that first sip of a dunkel that is so good, and you've never really had it before. You had similar, but suddenly this is something that is entirely different, and it's like it almost is shocking because it's so good, and you think, wow. And you try to describe it to your friends. You got to try this because this is really good. That's what that spring is like. The first breath of spring air after a long, ugly winter, is just like that. It is mesmerizing. It's like, and it makes you feel like, just as you said before, I don't want to go to work. I don't want to do anything. I just want to enjoy this. I'm happy. I want to go dancing. I want to dance with the air bubbles. I just, so that's what that's all about. I just spent half an hour describing something that took, half a minute to read.
all is good. That was that scene really hit home, and throughout the book, there's just the different way you use imagery that I really like, and I'm a big fan of something that makes me go, oh yeah, I've been there, even though I haven't been there physically where you're talking about. I've been there where the thing makes whatever it is you're looking at makes you go, yeah, I'm done. I think I just want to. I'm good. Do we have to do work today? So I like that. I like that. All right. So I'm going to read another one for you. This is from page 67. Now, over the years, I've developed a knack for recognizing unspoken, often subtle body language. It has become largely unconscious, and unless I'm, working a case, I rarely pay much attention to it. But when Connie saw Cal and he saw her, well, words would have been useless, just noise distracting from what they were saying to each other. I caught Luce's eyes, and she saw it too. You have a cool way of making the reader experience human behavior again. I mean, talk about what's going on here, because I've been this planet too, where it's like, there's something just happened right there. What was that?
Yeah. I think everybody recognizes what body language is all about, right? You may not be able to point to a particular behavior and say, oh, okay, that means this and that means that, translate into words, but you recognize it. And we all react to it. And if you watch your children, they speak body language long before they speak words. And you recognize what they're thinking, what they're doing, what they're saying through what they do. It's part of what it means to be human. We're very, very expressive that way. That never changes. But as you become more verbal, as you get older, and everything is translated, everything is converted into words. And so you look at reality, and there's a space between what you're thinking about, your cognitive processes, and what's actually going on outside of your head, right? So you translate everything. We all do, whether you know it or not, whether you realize it or not. That's what you're doing. You're translating everything. And you look at the world, and there's like a blip. You see something, there's a blip, and it becomes a word, or it becomes a series of words, or it becomes a sentence, or it becomes an abstraction, or it becomes, something that is not what it is. Okay. And when you're immediately with it and away from those descriptions that are always going on in your head, you can understand things on a level that you can't really when you have to filter it through words. Does that make sense? Does that all make sense?
Oh, yeah. That's
what's going on with Cal and with Connie. They see each other, and immediately there's something, there's a connection between them that is, you can't describe, you just recognize it. You can't, you have a hard time, even if you see something, and you've seen that before. I mean, in your own life, somebody will react. You ever been to a ball game? You're a baseball fan, right?
Yes, exactly.
Are you a baseball fan?
Big time.
And you're a Braves fan too, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Very big time fan, and this season is not so good.
I have to apologize to you because of what happened to the Braves this year.
Yeah, it's rough.
Rough. I'm really sorry, but yeah. Have you been to a game? Right, your favorite stadium where the Braves? I can't think of what the Braves stadium is called. What are they?
Truist Park. Truist.
Yeah. Truist Park. And you've seen something happen on the field that you haven't seen before, some spectacular play, Of course, you don't have Bryce Harper, so you don't see a lot of them, but you have a couple of players that are pretty good. You see a play that you've never seen before. You're a lifelong baseball fan. You love the game. You can't wait until the spring training takes place. You're following everything. You've got players that it's like they're your children or they're your brothers or they're your, you can't get enough of it. And you see this play that your favorite player makes or your favorite pitcher pitches or your favorite hitter hits that you've never seen before, right?
Right.
It has nothing to do with words. It has nothing to do with words, at least initially. It's just, you just can't believe what happened. And you don't translate it. It's immediate. It's absolutely immediate. Okay. Later, you translate it, and it never seems adequate. You try to explain what it was when that bat hit the ball, the sound, and the way the whole stadium was silent initially and then exploded. I mean, all of that you can't put into words in such a way that you convey exactly what happened. You have to experience it. Okay, having said that, that's what happened between Cal and Connie. And Lucia, and TB are watching this, and both of them know Cal, not well, but they know him. And both of them very much know Connie, especially Lucia, her niece. And they see this out of the blue. They don't expect it. They don't understand what's going on. They haven't had a chance to translate it into, mental processes. It's just there. It just happened. Just like when the ball arcs through the air, the summer air, from off the bat of your favorite player. Same thing. They look at it, they can't believe it. They look at each other, they realize that neither one of them can believe it, and yet there it is. That's what I was trying to convey when Cal and Connie met.
Oh, you did very good job. Did very good at that, and that's and I like that analogy with the baseball thing. And just remember, we'll be back. All right. So I got to edit.
Yeah. Back on my mind, there's always that fear.
So that's always looming in there too when you describe things like that. I do know that feeling because there's a play that's stuck in my head that I hope it will always be there, which I was at in 21 when just this incredible season happened for the Braves where they go and they win the World Series. But to get there, they had to go through all these teams, and one of them being the Dodgers, and we never beat the Dodgers. Matter of fact, that's who we're playing tonight. That's going to be interesting. But and it was just like that night. I was there with my family, and this home run is hit by our player, and it just what you're talking about when the stadium erupts suddenly into this massive sound. It's like the breath's all gone, and you realize that sucker's going over the wall, and it's like, God, there's nothing better.
Nothing like it.
Yeah, nothing like it at all.
Nothing like it.
So,
I have a real quick one. I'll tell you. Bryce Harper was playing, and I think it was after it was when he was playing first base. When he came back from his injury, right? So everybody was worried, and he had, you're thinking this is the franchise right here. This guy. And he's going for a ball, and he heads for the fence. Now, this is where first base is located. You got a low fence. You got a screen above it, but you got a low fence. And there's a camera crew behind the fence, right? You probably remember it because they had it all over the.
I do remember this when I was watching.
Yeah. And he goes for the ball, and he's focused on the ball, and he reaches out for the ball, and it hits his mitt, and he tumbles into the camera pit, right? And I remember thinking, I was cheering because he caught the ball, so that's an out. That's really good. It's Bryce Harper doing what Bryce Harper does, But it's Bryce Harper doing what he does, and he gets injured, and he just came back from the IL,
Right.
and he was, IR rather, and so you don't know whether he's okay or not, and you can't see him, as you're watching on TV, and so then he gets up, and what does he do? He grins and holds the ball up. He doesn't care whether he's hurt or not. He's just, so that's the kind of thing that you remember. Yeah, I remember. It's like playing it in my head all the time.
It's funny. That's that play by itself, by the way. I was watching it, and I said to my wife, I said, that's one of those things where they all clap and they all cheer, and then afterwards, the manager comes up to him and has to say something like, "You do understand that if you'd gotten yourself taken out of the game," Anyway, although it would have made a lot of Braves fans happy. So. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Kind of like your guy who was out for a large part of the season too. Is he back, by the way, or not?
It depends on which one you're talking about right now. We have.
You've got more than one.
I'm surprised the mascot hasn't gotten injured. What's that?
Who's your guy on the Braves?
My favorite is, and I got a couple of them, but my real all-time favorite who's really done some cool things this year, and it's just as a designated hitter is Marcell Ozuna, and because he went from being everybody booing him to suddenly he found what he needed to, but and then the other one is Matt Olson, who plays first for us, and last year he hit this and
he's a good player.
He set a franchise hit record for home runs, and then this year it's like he lost all that magic, and he's been trying to recover from it. But he does some pretty cool things. And this season there was a couple neat plays where he has no problem moving up so that when he catches the ball, he throws it to help generate double plays. And that's something to me that when they really generate that, unless they happen to your team, but when they really make it happen, it's like, oh, that's a cool.
Sweet.
It's just so sweet, and that's. But those are my two favorite players. But when you talk about someone who's on the field all the time, it's Olson, and but it's good stuff. So all right, so I'll switch back to your book. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to keep going.
I dragged you into it.
So. I love in a book when there's an uh-oh moment, and you have several of them in here, and you have a situation that reveals that a dog that is attacked, TB, it has a device in its head. What I'd like you to talk about is uh-oh moments, because I don't want to give away the stuff that happens here, because this is really cool. I like this. Before we were recording, I was talking about some of this stuff, and but just talk about the idea that something either impending doom might be happening, or something bad might be happening, or maybe you're faking out the reader.
Yeah, let's talk about the last comment. Yeah, because that's the aha moments can become trite, especially in a mystery or a suspense kind of. It doesn't matter whether it's a movie or a book or a song or whatever. Those aha moments a lot of times are so predictable that it's hard to use them. So what I like to do is play with the aha moment. If you're expecting something dire to happen, then something dire doesn't happen. If you're not expecting something to happen, it's not an aha moment, then something happens. That's what I try to do. I try to turn it upside down. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and that is what I attempt to do. I don't always succeed. A lot of times I'll write it and rewrite it and come back to it in order to get it just right. But in that particular case, and again, I can't describe it because it's something that's fun in the book. But yeah, it's a satisfying conclusion to a scene, okay? And not a predictable conclusion to the scene. And then it keeps repeating for quite a while after that because nobody quite understands how it happened. You know what I mean. So, but that's essentially what I try to do. And then also, to come back to like the second part of that question, I try to extend it. So instead of just being something that pops up and then it goes away, if I can get some material out of it, extend that moment to some extent so that it's either described differently or it has some impact on the rest of the story, then I also try to do that. But yeah, I have to say that these last couple of questions that you've asked makes it sound like I'm sitting back and I'm plotting all of this, all these aha moments and all that. It really doesn't work that way. As I'm writing the story, it's just where the story goes organically. Nice. And I look back and I say, oh, yeah, that was pretty good. And then we go on. I may like with this particular one with the dog, I may come back and rewrite pieces of it because I'm trying to, the nuances that I'm trying to. But usually I'm writing the story. I'd be telling a story. I'm writing the story. And then I look back at it, sometimes not even that time, not even as I'm doing it, but I come back and look at it the next day and reread it. Oh, yeah, that was pretty good. And that's how I do it. It's not, I think, were you the one who was telling me the difference between plotting and by the seat of the pants, plotting a plotter or a pantser?
Oh, we may have talked about that in the last time we talked, because I like to ask that question.
Well, yeah, I'm a combination of the two, I think, but mostly a pantser, if I had to put a label on it.
Nice.
So I'm not sure whether I addressed your question or not, but
you have. It's cool because it's like what I like is like what you just described. It's unlike in a horror movie or maybe a horror reading where you're ready for jump scares or something like this. It's nice in thrillers and mysteries and stuff like this when you get fooled that you think this might be a jump scare coming, and instead it's not exactly what you think it's going to be. And I like that, especially then when you mess with me because I thought I had something figured out and then I don't because of whatever you did.
Isn't that fun? When you're reading, those are my favorite places. Yeah.
I love that. And to know that a writer is really letting himself kind of flow with the story so that, it's not really planning exactly how this is all going to turn out makes it even cooler. So I gotta read another one for you. It goes like this. I slowly rose to my feet and padded to the front of the room. I stood listening, but all was silent. I walked back to the couch and with my hands indicated to Luce to stay put. I went through the kitchen archway, located my Beretta hanging in the coat closet and pulled the slide back. Then I went to the back door, disengaged the door lock, and stepped out into the darkness. And right here, I wanted to yell, "What are you, nuts? Don't go outside. Don't go outside." And by the way, if you've never been to a movie on an Army base when it's all basic trainees, you run into people who yell at the movie, and it's like, what? Stop that. But what are you doing in this scene? Talk to us about that, especially now that you've said this other stuff. This is even cooler.
What my mindset was as I was writing it, I had Luce and TB in one of those moments where they were, sort of not rehearsing, but they were kind of rerunning what had happened, discussing it back and forth. They were relaxed. They were enjoying each other's company, as two people that are close frequently do. Although for them, as I'm writing the story, I try to make those moments as memorable as I can. So they're sort of isolated from the world around them and caught up in each other. Okay. And as I'm writing it, I'm thinking, I just finished a part like this. This seems contrived. There has to be something happening, because we've reached a moment where the story needs to progress. And so it's like an instinct, this is, I can't indulge in this too much longer. I needed to figure out, and I was thinking about it, what I needed. Okay. So I tied together a thread from, how do I put this without giving anything away? What they were investigating, you've got one component with the dog, you've got another couple of components here, there, elsewhere. So you don't really know what's going on as a reader, but clearly there's something going on that isn't explained yet. Okay, so I thought this is a good place to introduce another example of that. Okay, and so, suddenly their reverie, their canoodling is interrupted by something. And he hears this something, she hears this something, and so he goes out to investigate. Now, as you've read it, you know that he's going to the back door, and the noise that they hear is at the front door, okay? Which is why he's able to go out, because that's not where the noise is coming from. So he's going out the back door. And if you read it, if you go back and reread that, you'll see that that's there, okay? But a lot of people don't do that. I mean, they're reading it, especially if they've only read it once. And they haven't automatically put that together. So when he goes out there, there's a sense of going into the darkness, going into the mystery. But as I was writing it, I know that the bad guy is out here at the front door, not at the back door. And so when he goes out, his plan is to do exactly what he did and track it down. So that's as close as I can get to explaining what happened there.
Oh, that's good. That's good, because I think it was a neat way the scene emerged.
Transition.
Yeah, it was a good transition. That's a great word to use. And it just, but I do have to tell you that part of me is wanting to just yell out loud, "Don't go outside. What are you doing? That's not where good stuff happens." All right. Anyway, I like that. All right. So we're getting close to wrapping things up. And so tell the audience why they want to read Of Towers and Shadows.
It's a good yarn. It's a good story. It is engaging. It keeps your attention from the start to the finish. And the only people that I would be concerned about reading it, if you're apoplectic, if your blood pressure is too high, and you try to avoid those kinds of situations where your blood pressure is going to be spiked, then you probably don't want to read it. But if you enjoy being excited, if you enjoy having adrenaline rushes while you're reading, I think it's a good book to read. That's one reason. Second reason, it is, if you like romance kind of novels, not rom-coms, there's not much comedy in it, but if you like romantic stories that have an arc that is intriguing in many ways, then you want to read it. That's number two. Number three, the difference between the beginning of the novel, the start of it, and the end of the novel, the way it's finished, you cover so much territory, and you have actually a sea change in the very center of the novel, almost the exact center of the novel. It almost makes it a different story. It isn't. I mean, it's all connected and it all makes sense. You don't recognize it as being that at that moment. But when you finish it, you think, oh my gosh, what happened there? So it's entertaining on those three levels. You're surprised and gratified at the ending. You have no way of knowing what's going to happen at the ending. It is very romantic in a lot of different ways and for different reasons. There's even a spiritual component to it if you pay attention. So I think it has entertainment value for all kinds of reasons, for all kinds of people.
Very cool. And I encourage them to read. It's a great story. We're getting close to finishing up, and as we pull it to a close, if someone wanted to follow up and connect with you or learn more, where would you send them?
Probably, I have a Facebook page. They can find me there. They can find just, as you're trying to find anybody on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, although not with any real purpose. I have an Amazon page that they can find out more about, about the books and about me personally, I guess. And then I have a webpage that is not a whole lot better than it was last time we talked, but it's getting there. And actually I've got I dug into my bank account, and I have somebody that's working on the webpage because I realized that there was no way I was going to improve it, at least not as much as I wanted to improve. So it's being done. It isn't quite there yet, but the webpage is just the easiest way is DennisAFeece.com, and it'll pop right up.
Very cool, and I'll make sure that's in the show notes and that information. And it does; it pops right up, and on there you got to wait. It's got a little box where you can contact you, so that's good stuff. So I'll make sure it's there. So awesome. I got one last question for you, and it goes like this, Dennis: if you were given a chance to talk with an audience of new writers, what advice would you give them about getting started?
Just get started. Just sit down wherever you're comfortable. Let your imagination take over, and don't worry about whether it's any good or not. Just keep writing. And it really that's exactly it. I was talking to someone about that recently. I don't know. Let's start a novel, back and forth. Don't worry about not starting it. Just start it. Just do it. It's like breathing. If you have an imagination, if you didn't have an imagination, you wouldn't be thinking about writing. And if you are thinking about writing rather than painting or, making milkshakes for your friends or whatever it is, or drinking beer or whatever, or going to baseball games, if you're thinking about writing and that occupies your imagination, then just sit down and do it in a comfortable place and do it on your own terms. And don't listen to anybody else. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to Steve. Don't listen to anybody. Just do it. Be creative. That's all you have to do.
That's awesome. I love it. Great advice. And Dennis, thank you so much for sharing your newest book of Towers and Shadows. It's suspenseful, engaging, excellent read, and looking forward to more stories from you. Wishing you the best in all you do.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching Learning Leading K12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching Learning Leading K12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.